All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, Adopt for Life's weekly Facebook Live, where we explore the topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. My name is Chantal. I'm the Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life. I'm here as a monitor. I'm going to monitor the chat and post important links and key takeaways. And our host, Julia, also a regional parent liaison with Adopt for Life. And today our guest is Natalie Healy from Surrey Place. And we're going to be talking about and answering your questions about navigating the diagnosis minefield. We received a lot of questions. And so if you're watching this live and you have a question for Natalie, please feel free to drop it in the chat and I will relay it. Before we get to all those questions, I'm going to introduce Natalie. Natalie has over 20 years experience working in the developmental sector with individuals of all ages and abilities, supporting diverse families and their children with complex needs. Her genuine passion working with families has led to her current role, which focuses on developing and facilitating workshops and events that support parents and caregivers' mental health and well-being. She is a yoga and meditation teacher and certified holistic life coach. Her biggest joy and accomplishment are her family. Natalie and her husband have 2 sons whom they adopted. Being their mother is a privilege and a daily reminder of how precious life is. Natalie's motto, love and kindness are never wasted. Love that. I feel like I need a motto too.
Yeah, I love that you included that. That's wonderful.
So whether you're watching this live or on replay, thank you for taking the time to be with us. As I said, feel free to ask her questions or pop a comment, just say hi. We love to know that you're watching. I do want to remind you that this is being live streamed on our public Facebook page. So what that means is that whatever you're putting in the comments is available to the public. So you do want to be mindful and not include any identifying information if you are asking a question related to your child. So with that in mind, please join us, and I hope you find this discussion informative and engaging. Julia, I think I'm done with my spiel.
Pass the baton.
I'm passing it over.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a bunch of questions. I hope we get to them all, but also, most importantly, we want to hear your answers. So some of them are scenario questions, but we'll start with, for families who are receiving a new diagnosis, access to supports can be overwhelming. Can you offer any advice or suggestions as just a starting point?
Yep. So, hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I know that, starting out can be really overwhelming. I do always remind the families that I work with to be really careful about the dark hole of Google and the internet, because it can take you to places that, you don't really need to be. I always like to remind families that, there are similarities in certain diagnoses, but that each one of our kiddos and individuals, we're all different. It looks different for everyone. So I think that if you have a confirmed diagnosis, then you want to reach out to the lead agencies that specialize in that area. We have now developed a centralized intake. And so what that means is it doesn't matter what you're looking for around diagnosis or any kind of special needs, intellectual disabilities. You can always call our centralized intake. I know that Chantal is probably going to put the website into the chat for us. And you're going to be looking at 2 things there. You're going to be looking at our centralized intake, which you can do online. There's a simple link. It'll only ask you a few questions. And then what happens is an intake facilitator will connect with you and help you get started and get the information that you need. Or there's also a 1-888 number, and you can call that number. It's 24 hours, and you can do the same thing, give very basic information, and then someone will contact you. So, you want to be sure that you're going to the right source for the right information. often we worry about things that we don't need to be worrying about yet. So I really urge everybody to pace themselves and get the information from the right sources.
Yeah, for sure. And I think going directly to the agencies that specialize in whatever the diagnosis might have been is where you're going to get that immediate support as well. So you're not just sort of floundering in that, as you say, Google abyss. Yes. Really better to have that support as you move through in learning more and more and more about what your family is navigating. Yes. What are some things that you encourage parents to do when they first receive that diagnosis? So you mentioned like no to Google, so that's a don't, but what do you suggest as far as some just first things to do once they get that news?
I think it's important to take some time to process it, right? And to really weigh out, the things that need to happen right away and the things that don't. And I think it's important to also recognize that, if you're a two-parent family, or you're supporting a child, and there's two adults, I always suggest that everyone in that sort of home is going to get on the same page. I've seen a lot of situations where, mom or the main caregiver is very comfortable and almost like, I knew that's what it was going to be, and sort of steamrolls forward, but really dad is still trying to process. So an example of that is my son has ADHD. We went to the appointment. We were supposed to have 4. He was diagnosed on the 2nd. My husband standing at the door, walks in, doctor, drops the diagnosis, and he turned around and walked out. And I was like, okay, give me all the stuff in writing so I can go and get what he needs in school. We process that information very differently. So that's the first thing that I always tell parents or those getting a diagnosis is to take your time, get all the information, make sure everybody's on the same page before you start sharing it with others. And really just take that time as a family to understand truly what that's going to mean.
Yeah, for sure. Prioritizing what those next steps will be, and also just recognizing it's okay to not know everything yet. You just found out, so
absolutely,
be gentle with yourself in that way too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, this next one is one of those scenario questions. So The question is, my daughter was recently diagnosed with FASD. We have an upcoming appointment to discuss medications. What are some key things I should ask?
That's a great question. So I think the main thing is to have your questions written out. That is something that I would really suggest, because you get to the meeting and it doesn't matter, how much experience you have or how prepared you think you are before you arrive. It's an overwhelming process. So really those things that come up, maybe those questions that are keeping you awake at night, maybe something someone else is asking you or something someone else has told you that is probably negative, write those things down, ask those questions. We're usually looking at what are the side effects of medication, how long, would the child need to take the medication, and then also talking about appetite and sleep. Those seem to be the two things that really affect kiddos when they're on the medications. And then have a plan, right? Like know that generally most professionals will start off slow and work their way up to what is working for the child, the individual. It looks different for every single child. Different medications work differently for different children. And that's also, try not to have conversations where you're comparing what's happened to somebody else or what you've read somewhere. So write the questions down, ask the ones that are on your mind, the ones that scare you, the ones that maybe you need more information on. And then also, when can we come back? So if we start this medication, when do I get to come back? If something goes wrong, what do we do? So that you can go away from that appointment feeling as secure and positive as possible.
Yeah, really good points. I know from a personal standpoint, one of my biggest questions was if we noticed any kind of adverse reaction, could we stop immediately? Or was this something that, so those types of questions are great in that moment. And one medication we had started with our daughter, she just went into a full body, rash. And I was like, okay, we need to stop this. And so I had to, because I hadn't asked in that initial appointment, I had to try and get my doctor on the phone and say, can we just stop this? Or, making sure that we're doing that safely in the moment too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Here's another scenario for us is my 8-year-old child is displaying some behaviors that are challenging. How do I know if this is a phase or if it's something that I need to include some professional intervention in?
It's a really good question. I think something that I usually ask families that I work with is it happening in all environments? So is it just happening with one person? Is it just happening in one place? Or is this concerning behavior happening in all environments, daycare, school, babysitter, moms, dads, placement, so on and so forth? Also, is it interrupting with joy of everyday living? Is there safety issues? Are there things that are beyond that? This is just a difficult phase, but I really worry A, B, and C. I think that those are the main things that come to mind for me, and is the constant conversation that I have with parents that ask this question.
Yeah, I think as parents, we do it all the time, right? Where is this coming from? And trying to work out, has there been changes in the home or the family or school, or what could be triggering? I think trying to identify your kids' triggers in these things is maybe something that can have a lot of clues for us as well.
And writing it down,
yes,
right, Julia?
a journal or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Because sometimes in our mind, it's like, this is so horrific. And sometimes it's because there's other things happening. But really at the end of the day, is it just that we're exhausted? Is it just that we can change this one thing? And, oh, look, getting out the door today was easier because, I'm organized. And, I remember talking to somebody about my own son's behavior. And then the pediatrician said to me, at what point are you going to start thinking about what your role is in this? And, I do this for work, but when it's your own child, it's completely different.
Yes.
And you know what? My anxiety about getting out the door in the morning with a baby and a really busy little boy was actually making things so much more worse, right? So that's just a simple example, but it's kind of taking a look around, just as you said, documenting what's happening. Have you, what's happening in the environment? It's all communication, right?
Yeah.
And so then we're looking at, is this just a normal stage? Is this just a kid being a kid? Is this regular development? Or is something happening here?
Mm-hmm. I think journaling is such a great step when either you've just got a diagnosis or you're thinking that might be coming down the road, to really be able to have that for the professionals to say, the last 6 months, this is what I've documented, or going in there a little bit armed with some history of what you've remarked so far. And then also being able to look back maybe in a positive way and say, wow, okay, 6 months ago we were there, now we're here. Look at how far we've come,
Exactly. That's such a good point. And I just wanted to add, now, I'm suggesting to parents just to put it in the notes section on their phone, because you'll get to your appointment and be like, I forgot my notebook, but you always have your phone with you. So those things that come up, or those things you want to remember, just put it in your phone so you've got it at your appointments.
Oh, that's such a good idea. Yeah, because you don't necessarily always have the time, or you won't remember when you get home to that journal. So yeah, use that section in our phones. That's a great idea. What are some ways that parenting styles can shift in response to a diagnosis? So I think this question is really about, once we have that diagnosis and then we understand how that it translates to our individual child, as you've mentioned, it's unique for everybody. It's sort of about, adjusting those expectations, and how does that translate in our parenting?
That's exactly what I've written down on my notepad. It's about the expectations, right? And also it goes back to what I just mentioned before. As the caregiver, what can I do to make this better for all of us? Knowing now that perhaps this kiddo has sensory issues, right? So, as an example, I stopped putting snow pants on in the morning. I put them in a bag and I let somebody else deal with it in the day. Snow pants, I knew was just a nightmare. He overheated, he didn't like the feeling of it, so on and so forth. So we changed because I think our fear a lot of times is decreased. I think that sometimes when we don't know, we're parenting out of fear, and our own anxiety is affecting some of the things that are happening within our family and the caring of our child. I think that when we have all the information, we'll all have our own different aha moments where it's like, you know what, maybe if we do it this way, this won't happen. And so it's looking at the strengths and the needs around the diagnosis, and then reshifting a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Don't be so hard on ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
We really are.
Yeah, we are. So true. We are. I wonder,
can I pop in just for a second? Sorry, because you just said something that was like, is a whole other snack and chat, I think. Parenting from a place of fear. I mean, how many times do we go there and we just, you know, and to take the time to recognize those words, I mean, and what that means. And I mean, that's huge. Anyway, I don't know. That's a whole other snack and chat.
But like as we go back to it, it gives me goosebumps. And also I think it's good to highlight, because most of us, I'm assuming, are here because we're in the adoption process. There's so much unknown for us sometimes, on top of as being a biological parent of what we don't know in parenting, right? For me, I had a brand new baby put in my arms and they were like, okay, bye, 16 days, you know, like there's just so much unknown. And there is a lot of fear. There's extra fear, I feel, for this process in a way, right?
And I feel like, I can't speak for everyone, but I know that when you're in that state, you're only reacting.
Oh my gosh, right? Survival mode. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is necessary at times, but you know, to be in that state for a prolonged amount of time is very the stress that it puts on a person. Anyway, I am taking this in a tangent. Myself. Back to the question.
Actually, I'm going to go a little off track too, just because something popped into my mind in talking about that fear aspect. How much do you talk to parents about sharing their own triggers with their children in an age-appropriate way? If the child is of age to understand that we too have triggers and how we're managing them, what do you say to parents about that?
What I always say to parents, no matter what the question is honesty is always the best policy, as long as it's age appropriate, right? And so I think that it helps children realize that we're all human. It's not just them doing things wrong. You know, I think it's okay to say, you know, being late for work is something mommy worries about. So let's work together as a team and try and get out the door, you know, I mean, that's just an example, but it's another question that comes up: sharing a diagnosis, telling a child about a diagnosis, extended family, all of that is find your language, have a plan. I come from a place of always being honest. Both my boys know they're adopted. I have an older brother I care for on the spectrum. He fully understands his diagnosis and, you know, his needs around his mental health. And my kids think everybody's adopted. That's how much we talk about it. You know, it's just normal in our home. And I think it's important for our kids to know that we have things that are difficult for us as well. I think it's important.
Yeah, for sure. It makes us all the more relatable and just real to the situation.
And then it's not just them all the time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like sometimes I just feel like, you know, some ages and stages, everyone's going to find like, you just don't feel like a good parent because you're always just at them. And, you know, no matter if there's a diagnosis or not, that's just, you know, I've got a 16-year-old and it's hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. What advice do you have for parents who are close to or feeling burnt out?
Self-care. I know it's such a buzzword. I know there is no time, but you have to make the time because you will get sick. You will burn out. And I was a person who said it would never happen to me, and it did, and it came out of nowhere and it hit me hard.
Yes.
So that is why I am where I am with wellness now. It has been a piece of something that I've wanted to share with all caregivers for a long time, because we can go in and do lots of work with a child and put in lots of things in place. But if you're too tired or too unwell to be able to carry those pieces out, then it's all, you know, it's not a great use of anybody's time. And so whatever that looks like for you, you've got to find just a little window, even if it's 5 minutes, to be able to calm your mind, take care of yourself, self-compassion, self-love, self-care, fresh air, sleep. It's underrated. And, we are really focusing on that at Surrey Place. And so anyone who joins us today, please check out our wellness offerings. We have weekly meditation, 15 minutes. We try to work around what it might be like to be working from home or having little ones at home. Yoga. We have a whole mind, body, soul series that's once a week where we're doing what is self-care, what is meditation, making a vision board. We talk about nutrition. I know it'll feel like another thing that you have to do. But if you get anything out of this session, please look after yourselves. We have to look after ourselves.
It's that whole analogy of the oxygen mask on you first, right?
I just want to linger here for one more minute, sorry, because I know that self-care, when parents hear it or caregivers hear it, it can trigger like, oh my God, don't tell me to do self-care. And it's almost like a reaction, like, and I think that is worth reflecting on. Why are you resisting so much, and why? I know, and like you said, you have to reimagine what the definition of self-care is. It's not, it was a big buzzword all about taking long baths and walks on the beach. I mean, let's be real, nobody has time for any of that. So it can just be 5 minutes of breathing.
And it's not 1 minute
of breathing.
And it's you know what, Chantal, you're right, breath. Like even if it's breath, just start with breath work. I had to learn to breathe. I'm not even kidding you.
I'll be very honest. Personally, I was very resistant. Even still, the term sort of makes me. But one thing that was a big game changer for me was to think of it in micro mindfulness. So like it's just these little moments. So even after we're done this, before I go to the next work thing, I'll just take a minute and take 5 deep breaths and just feel that, and then move forward. And that makes it so much more attainable for me. The idea when it first came to me was like, okay, well, what do you do for self-care? When I was first asked, I was like, well, sometimes once a year I get away for a weekend. And the person I was talking to was like, yeah, that's not going to do it. So it was a real game changer for me to think of it in these little tiny things. So I have a journal or a coloring book. I'll do 1 page out of it and then go back to work. And it just is 5-10 minutes, and it really does make a difference. So it doesn't have to be, as you say, a big, overwhelming, elaborate thing. It's just as simple as breathing and smelling the fresh air, or just having the sun on your face for 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
Any activity where you feel like you can reset yourself. Like for me, I walk my dog. And I usually try to meet neighbor friends. And I never thought of that as self-care until somebody pointed it out to me. And I was like, oh, you're right. Like,
and just to add to that, with the pandemic on top of it, we get no time alone. And, when it first began, people would check in and say like, how are you doing? And I said, I'm fine. I just have moments where I feel like I'm being suffocated because there was no room, right? Someone was on a computer somewhere. You couldn't kick the kids outside. Like, I'd never worked at home with my husband before, we're still married.
Yes.
But on top of everything else, you just have to find, a moment to be able to regroup. And it's not selfish. It is a necessity. We have to do it.
Exactly.
I know it's a little over the top, but I speak from a place of honesty and experience. And
it is that important. If you're somebody who still has a pen and paper day timer, write it down in there, make it a slot just as you would as important as a meeting would be, or that kind of thing, right? All right, next scenario for us is we are exploring options for some challenging behaviors that our daughter is displaying. What should be our focus when looking to secure supports? And I think this one is really like, if there's several behaviors or several things that we're trying to move through, how do we identify that leading behavior and get access to supports for that one?
I think if it's this significant, then you're going to be working, I would say, with professionals of some kind and setting goals, right? So you're going to want to set some sort of goal. And usually the big one, if we're addressing the big one, let's just say sleep. If we can get that one organized, then generally these other ones that are also presenting start to lessen or even disappear. But it's good to have a plan, and it's good to focus on one thing. I think in the beginning, particularly if you're not experienced, and I do encourage you to get some help. We have a triple P program that we offer. You know, we do have some behavioral sessions. There are other agencies also that offer those types of things. But I do think it's good to have a plan, and I do think it's good to share that with all those involved, daycare, school, other parents or caregivers, so that everybody is on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, sort of what we were talking about more in the beginning too, is just prioritizing and going slow and steady, and, you know, acknowledging you don't have to tackle everything all at once.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, we don't want to go at it as the idea of fixing anybody, right? It's what we want to think about. What can we add, or what can we take away from the situation to help it settle a little bit? Write it down, ask the questions, go back to the professional, because otherwise we'll just be completely overwhelmed. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, this next scenario is a 9-year-old. So 9-year-old diagnosed with FASD and ADHD. Mm-hmm. I don't feel ready to introduce medication at this age. However, the behaviors are becoming more challenging. And I'm wondering what advice you might have for parents who are at the point of making that choice, that yes, I think we do need to include a medication.
This is such a good question. And, you know, all of us go through it in our own way, with medications, with maybe extra help at school, whatever the case may be. Take your time, ask your questions, have a plan, and know that nothing is forever, right? A lot of us think that if we start medication, it's the rest of their lives, right? It's going to be forever. Nothing is forever. Many kids don't need medication always. So I'll give you my example. Is my son started medication at quite a young age, to be honest, younger than I would have liked to have ever been giving him medication, and he is now completely unmedicated. He stopped taking medication. By himself, he just said, "Mom, it doesn't feel good. I don't want to take it." Grade 6. So it was grade 2 to grade 6, only at school, slow release, nothing in the evening, nothing during the summer. That was my choice. And I forget he was even on medication. I lost weeks of sleep over that decision. My husband and I were not on the same page. Family members had lots of opinions. And I think that's the other piece, you know, do what's right for you as a family, as a caregiver first, and then get all the information so that when someone comes to you with something that maybe isn't accurate, you can say, actually, that's what I thought too, but, you know, A, B, and C. We did try natural things first. I'll be completely honest. We looked at diet, we looked at dyes, allergies, those types of things. They did help somewhat, but school really was not going well. My little guy was a December baby and he was premature. So there was all of those things. It wasn't just the behavior. There were all those things, right? I remember taking his sucky from him and sending him to school the following week and hoping he didn't fall asleep. When I look back on that, like, he was a baby back then, right? Yeah. That was the half days. Remember the half day?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, nobody wants to medicate their children. I mean, for the most part, but I can tell you that I have seen some amazing outcomes with kids that I've worked with who have been medicated, and I've seen some negative ones. But go with your gut, get all the information, and know that nothing is forever.
Yeah, I think that is such a good point, because the idea that we're starting this, you know, heading down this medication path can feel so permanent and defeating, and it really doesn't need to be that way. You make a really good point too about empowering parents to know that there is choices within the medication path. You know, you can take a break in the summer, you can just have something to support school or just to support sleep, and there's options there. And really trying to encourage the idea that this is a tool. you know, all of these
Totally.
things that we do as parents, and all the, you mentioned triple P, there's lots of different things that we can do as a parent to work on our parenting. But
Yeah.
if our child is not in a place where we can even reach them with that, then all our efforts are lost, right? So thinking of it as a tool is another way that I think it helped me anyhow to think of it that way.
Yeah. And also, you know, looking back, it gave my son the opportunity to learn how to self-regulate, yes, how to make friends. When he came off that medication, he already had this like posse of guys that he hung out with. Everybody in our community looked at him differently. He wasn't that kid anymore. You know, he was, he became a really awesome kid, and he learned how to sit still, and he, you know, he learned, he was very bright. So when we medicated him, it gave him the opportunity to find his way. And then he was old enough to say, you know, Mom, this makes my tummy sick, I don't feel good. And I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And we didn't even revisit it. It just was gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not all bad.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, within your role supporting families, that what has your experience been when it comes to the emotions of the caregiver and parent when they receive that initial news?
Yeah. You know, I'm not going to try to sprinkle any kind of joy, right? Like it's scary. It's a lot. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. Like for us, we're in this work, right? We do this every day. And when it's your own child, your own loved one, it's completely different. I think that it's important to take the time and to recognize that it's going to have some implications, but it's not the end of the world, right? It's going to be okay. My son's teacher was just telling me, my little one, that there's 21 kids in the class and 11 of them have accommodations or an IEP. Know that you're not alone, right? That nowadays with our school system and the way things are running, being online, everybody has needs. And that it it's not who they are. It's just how they learn. And like a vitamin, you know, some of us need extra this or less of that. And these are the conversations that I have often with the families that I work with. Some people will be relieved. Some people it'll come out of nowhere. I think that it's important to mention the cultural piece of it as well. Being in Toronto, we're so multicultural that there's a lot of stigma, and there's a lot of things that certain cultures still may not be certain of, and that we just have to take our time, be sensitive, get all of the information, and know that you're not alone, and there is lots of support.
Yeah, that's a great point to make, that, you know, not only may you be receiving this news, but how does that reflect culturally as well? Yes. is a really good point.
Yeah.
Are there any resources, books, links? You have already talked about some of them, but any sort of go-tos that as soon as you are supporting a family who's just received a diagnosis, this is your go-tos as far as where you think they need to be reading and watching? Yes.
So if you receive a diagnosis and you're eligible for funding, I think it would be good. And we've talked about burnout, and we've talked about programs and resources. Respiteservices.com is an amazing resource. It's kind of a one-stop shop where you could hire a worker to get a break, to do some self-care. They also help families one-on-one fill out the funding applications if you're eligible for it. They'll also help families make a respite plan if they're eligible, as well as they have an amazing website with all sorts of respite programs, camps, bursaries, that type of thing. The other website that's really, really helpful is connectability.ca. It has it broken down into, you know, young children, school-age kids, and then also adults. It has a lovely way of presenting information so that if you're looking for a specific thing, you can go in there and search it. And then it's just on this lovely little tip sheet. So you're not overwhelmed. It's really got these top 10 ways that you can, you know, address this issue. Or, you know, if you're looking for information on a specific diagnosis, it's got a one page of what that entails and what that looks like. It's got free visuals. It's got all sorts of great stuff. So they really should, they should pay me for plugging their website. But I love it. And at some point we'll be working with them in our events, we'll be on their page and so on and so forth. There's something for everyone.
Oh, that's
at
great.
connectability.ca.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's excellent. Okay, I'm going to go to this next question, and then just for time, I'll maybe just jump to the last, which is just where we give you some space to add any final thoughts. But This next question is about when dealing with school. So you mentioned that, when you are going to talk to faculty or teachers and that kind of thing about a recent diagnosis, what is the best way to go about that? And what is the best approach to secure the accommodations that your child needs?
Always meet with the principal instead of going to the teacher.
Okay.
If things get difficult from there, then you would want to think about putting things in writing on email. Typically, you'll get your questions answered quicker that way. There are so many great principals and great schools. If you have an actual diagnosis and a report, please share it. And know that it's confidential, but it would be important, particularly if it's highlighting strengths and needs. When you're going to speak with a teacher or, even like camp staff or like a respite program, you always want to highlight the strengths, right? Always. It's always about the strengths first. And then say, on tricky days, he needs a little bit of extra help with the schedule or, reminders to have safe hands or whatever it may be. Really get comfortable with the language you want to use to be able to advocate for your child, right? Yeah. Because they all have gifts and they all have strengths. And sometimes we don't get to see them, but that is always my advice to families. Go right to the principal, then to the teacher, get whatever help you can. And you don't have to use it. That's the other thing, connect with whatever you can, and then sort of pick and choose what's going to work for your child and your family.
Right. Yeah. I love that you mentioned that, because I think, in this conversation, we're talking mostly about parents who are just coming to this process and starting sort of at the beginning of getting a diagnosis. But one thing that I've shared before with my colleagues at Adopt for Life is something that I did that was so important to my own mental health, which was over the years moving through trying to secure supports for our daughter. I started going into every school meeting or any meeting with a professional with opening with all of the amazing things about my daughter, about how athletic she is and how talented she is and how hilarious she is, and often would get choked up at that point. But also it really emphasized, this is what I'm opening with because she's a human and she's amazing. But also as the adults in her world, this is what we need to support her to continue to be as amazing as she is. And that's such a good point. It was so important for my own mental health to stop going in and just focusing on the needs and the struggles. So focusing on the strengths, that's such a great point. I love that.
Yeah. And that's how we want them to remember them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like that, we want them to see them in this light rather than in this light. And our kiddos that come through the system, they already have they come with some extra bits and pieces, but I embarrass my kids because they are awesome.
Yeah. I think that's right. That's right.
But everybody needs extra bits and pieces. Yeah. And my whole thing is never be ashamed of who your child is, and whoever you can talk to about their strengths, do it. And when it comes to education, you have to voice it, because they'll get lost in the system, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The school system is our kids with needs. It's not the best place for them.
Yeah. So
always be proud. Always be proud.
Yeah. That's part of advocating, right? Being the cheerleader too. Yeah, absolutely. So just in the essence of time, I'll give you some space to just add any final thoughts or any key takeaways you would like us to make focus of.
Just know that there's lots of support. There's one thing that I wanted to mention, which I haven't, is we have something that's called While You Wait. It's a workshop that families can sign up for. I actually facilitate it for the most part. And what that means is you can go in there and attend. It's on Tuesdays. The next one is starting in November. So it's every Tuesday of every month, and you can come in and ask your questions. And so please do. We have some great fun there. And, you know, just always think about that whole idea of parenting out of fear or getting the right information. If I don't know, I'll help you get the information. It's free. Come join us, get a cup of coffee, stay for 10 minutes, an hour. If you're just starting, I think that's a really great place for people to go. And yeah, I mean, I've loved this. I would do this all day long. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, honestly.
And that workshop, they find that, like, they go to Surrey Place in the wellness services, and then in the calendar, they'll be able to just...
While you wait is what it's called.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
and I just wanted to also say that all of our events at Surrey Place are free. You don't have to be a client, and you just register, and then you'll get a link right away, and it's usually through Teams. So I only mention that because a lot of us are mostly used to Zoom. Okay. So just to keep that in mind. And there's an info at wellness there. If you have any questions or difficulties, send us a note and we'll get back to you right away. Someone monitors that through the whole day.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So I'll add that link in the chat for anybody that's watching, and then that way it's just easy. They can just click that and follow it. Natalie, this is the first time we met, and I just want to say such a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was amazing, and I hope you come back for another snack and chat at some point, because I know already how much you share with us, not only professionally but personally. I think that really it really speaks volumes, and our families really appreciate that when they get that personal.
I almost feel emotional. I'm so happy that this exists. I was saying to the girls before we started that this was never around when I was adopting, and it can be very lonely. And I feel so grateful to be here for all the things that I am passionate about. So anytime you find the topic, I'll be here.
You said it on air live.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here, and thank you, Julia, too.
Yes.
And it was a great discussion, and a discussion to be continued for sure. So if you have questions and you're watching this on replay, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll just get back to you directly if you can't find the information you're looking for at Surrey Place or on our website. Next week, can you believe it's the first week of November? We're kicking off our adoption awareness campaign. So stay tuned for all the upcoming events on that. Next Snack and Chat, we're going to be joined by Sandra Webb, who's a psychotherapist with over 30 years experience counseling families. And we're going to be talking about attachment, but attachment and positive adoption language. Because our theme this month is all about language and how language matters. So stay tuned, like and follow us on Facebook if you want to stay up to date, which I'm sure you do. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great day.